Hey folks, Fernando doing our video for the More Survivalist, and in this case I want to talk about some of the very important lessons we can take away from the attack, the vicious attack on Kyle Rittenhouse. And I mean it. If you analyze each separate incident, this kid or this man, depending, already 18 years old. For me, he's a kid because I have a son older than him, so that's the way I see it. But either way, this young man was exposed to a vicious attack, and following the trial, which I didn't watch all of it, but I watched quite a bit. It's very clear that he just doesn't quite understand why he was being attacked by these delusional criminals, these nutcases. Yeah, I mean, he obviously had the wisdom just to carry a weapon with him because he knew it was potentially dangerous, but I can tell that he was still surprised by how viciously attacked he was for no reason whatsoever. For nothing. People that didn't even know his name, knew nothing about him, they still attacked him like wild animals. So, I want to go through 5 very important lessons here from all the Kyle Rittenhouse incidents. First of all, number 1, what I'm just explaining, these vicious animals, these looters, murderers, rapists, criminals that were involved in the arson attack on this entire city while the government just stood by and let it happen. Very brave young men like Kyle Rittenhouse tried to do something about it. But other than that, really, this should have been in the hands of the local authorities, as it usually is the case when you have a bunch of criminals trying to burn down a city. I mean, unless it is great that you have the options as to stand your ground, defend yourself, and you have the right to defend your community. But there was already a local police involved. There's already a functioning government going on. This never should have happened in the first place. So number 1, these criminals condoned by the government, BLM and Antifa, burn, loot, and murder, basically. 3 of these people, criminals with a history of crime already. We have everything from a violent abuser to a rapist. The first one, the short guy, the short bald guy, he raped little children. I mean, he's he used to be a horrible person. And, some people joked about he died doing what he loved, chasing kids. Sure, but there's kids that didn't have a rifle to defend themselves, and they fell in the hands of this horrible human being and were abused by him. And he tried to do the same thing with Kyle. The difference, of course, is that Kyle was not a 9-year-old, and he had an AR-15. Also notice this: the 3 of them had a criminal record. The 3 of them were also white. It shouldn't really matter what color you are, your skin tone, how tan you are, or your specific ethnicity or background on all of that. But if we're going to be going for how racist the entire government is, just keep in mind that of these 3 attackers, all 3 of them were very white people, So that's where all of this starts falling apart. One of the Rittenbound had been released that same day from a facility where he was institutionalized. I mean, you just couldn't make this stuff up. Number 2, which is something that is gonna be, quite obvious. Kyle finds himself in this horrible mess. You can always say, well, it's always better to avoid problems than to have to deal with them. Would it have been better for Kyle never to be involved in any of this and not be there when this happened? I think he probably would have liked to avoid all of this. At the same time, I must say that he was doing something extremely noble. I'm looking at the kid right now. He's not the movie hero some people would expect. He's he just doesn't look the part, but you have to look at the actions rather than the physicality, and he is very much a noble young man, cleaning up his community, protecting the businesses, cleaning up graffiti. Again, you cannot make this stuff up either, how good this kid is, in spite of course, his flaws like any other human being and such, but overall, man, I would be super proud to have this kid as my son. By all means, absolutely. doing something for his community, standing for what's right, avoiding the fight, really, just literally running away. This is something that many got wrong in the commie mainstream media, that he was running towards the first attacker. No, he was running away from him. He was running away from this child molester that kept on chasing him and only ended up shooting when he really had no other choice, because he was grabbing the barrel of his gun already. It was at contact distance that Kyle made those first shots. It's quite easy to say, yes, avoid, don't get involved. Well, but if you're not getting involved, maybe that gas station would have burned, would have been torched. The person owning that gas station would have suffered the consequences of that. And you could say, well, it probably had insurance, well, yeah, but letting evil get its way and always get away with it, someone eventually has to say, okay, enough is enough. You have to put yourself, and remember, this is Kyle's community. He's not living there. His father lives there, but he was working there, I believe. So yeah, you could absolutely say, this is my community. I just don't want to see it burned to the ground, which is a very natural instinct, I guess, to have. So I guess the lesson here is, avoid problems, avoid trouble as far as possible. There's always, of course, a case of, at some point, you may have to stand your ground on some of the basic core principles you have. This is almost like when you look at self-defense, right? You avoid the fight, but there's a moment in which you cannot really run anymore because you're physically cornered and you have to, fight back. Same goes for when you're morally cornered in a position where my community is being burned to the ground. Am I going to be standing, or, my neighbor is being attacked? Am I really not going to be getting involved because the woman next door is being attacked by some thugs, and I'll just I'm not getting involved, right? But talking about that, number 3, know when it's not your fight. All right. So this would be one of those confusing cases in which you say, okay, what are you saying, Fernando? Don't get involved, but yes, do what's right, but at the same time, the lesson that I see here, number 3, is know when it's not your fight and don't get involved if it's not your fight. What I mean by this is, and I know I'm getting into quite complex ground here, but this is the way it is, folks. Believe me, it is nowhere near as simple and clean cut as you hope it would be. Definitely not like you see in movies. The perfect example is Kyle's story. It's not simple. You have to analyze it carefully so as to not make any wrong assumptions. But know when it's not your fight means, just because you see someone with a gun doesn't mean you have to draw your concealed carry gun and shoot him. You don't know if he's a cop. You don't know if he's responding to an illegitimate attack himself, like in the case of Kyle. Some people just saw a kid running with a gun, a few shots fired. You could say that people were like, what's going on? Is he attacking someone? Did he just shoot someone? If you listen to some of the evildoers that knew what was going on, and said he just shot, pretending it was not his right to defend himself, you may be misled into thinking, okay, that kid is an active shooter, I'm bringing him down and drawing my gun. Don't get involved in things until you're absolutely certain that you are on the right side. If you were just right there, walking around, doing your thing, and you saw him running away, or just imagine like in any other instance, you see someone with a gun, you see people getting shot, and what? You're just going to be assuming he's an active shooter? There's plenty of cases in which that's exactly going to be the case, but sometimes it's not. In the case of Kyle, he was not an active shooter that needed to get shot himself. He was just someone defending himself and running away from a mob. All right. So, and this can be a case of a off-duty police officer or a law-abiding citizen defending himself with a firearm. Like in the case of Kyle, it's a long gun, but it would have been the same thing with a handgun. He's just defending himself. You see someone with a gun, but you don't know his actions. You don't know if that's your fight or if that's something you need to get involved. Be very much certain about that before you act. At the same time, when you know you have to act, when you know it's right, that's going to be up to you to make that call. But the aspect of knowing it's not your fight, this is something that gets very much a lot of attention in some of the more advanced self-defense shooting classes that I took. And you role play these things with actual cases. I actually did one in which there were a couple of, and you do this like, you make up you make a mock store or situation. So you're sitting at a table and you see a couple people, or you're just pretending to be at a bank and you see someone bringing a gun. What is it you're going to be doing? You're going to be drawing and shooting your gun? Well, some of these cases were, as I'm saying, law-abiding citizens, police officers that were trying to arrest someone. So know when you shouldn't be getting involved. Number 3, in terms of the gear he used, Kyle is definitely not a extremely knowledgeable person in regards of firearms, right? But he had a few right calls here, and this served him very well. The AR-15, it's not a platform I'm particularly fond of. I think that it has several flaws in the design, but given how popular it is, of course, it makes a lot of sense. You have so much going for it in terms of the way you can customize and parts and availability of accessories for it. You have a lot going on for it in favor of the AR-15. But it definitely served him very, very well in this case. Notice that if he had something less of a gun in terms of stopping power, the first attacker maybe would have gotten to him, maybe take away his firearm. 223 or 556, it's quite effective, especially at those ranges. So it did its job. Also notice his use of a sling. This sling is essential so as to have weapon retention, have the gun on you, and make it difficult for the guy to take it away from you. Now, this is something that you have to be knowledgeable. Kyle knows a bit, doesn't know enough, as I wish he would have known so as to make his position a little bit better. But in terms of the sling, if I'm using a sling and I have it on me and that's going to be helping me in the retention, does that mean that someone cannot take away the gun from me? No, with enough force, everything snaps. So if an attacker is actively trying to take the gun away from you, the sling is not 100% reassurance that he's not going to be successful at it. You still need to defend yourself in spite of having the gun and the sling, because it is, and it's often the case that these are designed so as to, at a point, break, so as to, in case of an accident, not have the sling strangle you. It's not always the case, but it often is that they're designed specifically to have a breaking point within reason. So, not have your body ripped to pieces because of it, if it's caught in machinery, vehicles, and so on and so on. Again, not always the case. Sometimes people improvise this on their own, and it actually makes a lot of sense if you may find yourself in these situations. But sling, gun, all of these things definitely serve him very well. And finally, point number 5 that I want to make in terms of how useful the knowledge can be when you find yourself in cases like this, right? He was quite lucky. I'll say that Kyle was quite lucky because he ended up shooting everyone that needed to get shot, including little bald guy here, right? And this other one, the one that lefty, the one that had his right bicep blown to pink mist. He accepted it himself. I was pointing a gun at him and was trying actually to kill him. So yeah, he was in the right to defend himself. I mean, the moment you acknowledge, this is all caught in tape, of course, which makes this very difficult to refute, but he was actively pointing, he chased him, pointed a gun at him. Of course, Kyle has a right to defend himself. Again, how the right firearm, proper ammunition, even with less than an ideal center of mass shot with someone with a gun, he still managed to stop him because the shock of all of a sudden seeing your bicep blown to pieces really changes your priorities. So remember all of the tactical wise guys out there that say, you always only center of mass counts. Well, guy with a gun just like a few inches away from Kyle, shot in the arm, stopped him quite effectively. He's still alive right there, right? But it did a job. It did its job. In terms of the knowledge, how important it is, there was a little moment there in the trial when the prosecutor was going after Kyle and kind of accusing him of using full metal jacket ammunition, which is worse than hollow point, because the hollow point explodes in the body and stays there, but the full metal jacket goes right through you. And he was trying to make the case of Kyle wanting to hurt and murder as much people as possible. It is not true. That is simply not the case. I was watching it and I wish I could be there and, talk for this kid and just explain and say to this asshole, you know what? You think you know what you're talking about, but you don't know. Full Metal Jacket, 5.56 with a barrel length of my gun, in case of Kyle's gun, is specifically designed so as to fragment on impact. All of that nonsense about the hollow point being the one that stops, that may work for handgun ammunition. In terms of 5.56, the Full Metal Jacket is specifically designed to fragment on impact. So it is not true it's going to be going through a number of people. That is not a valid point for a proper accusation. That would be a good example of how having the proper knowledge would allow you to stand your ground and defend your position a lot better. Anyway, guys, just a few points I think it's important to learn from this. I'm pretty sure he's gonna be walking as he should. And his defense did a very good job, did a great job, and especially with everything caught on video, very hard to nail him on anything. He's quite obviously innocent of all charges. So yeah, that's gonna be all for now, folks. Remember that if you're interested in the kind of survival preparedness way of thinking that I have, you have my book specifically on all of these topics: economic collapse, street survival skills. Links for that below. And yes, tomorrow I still have to ask Matt if he's gonna be available, and if all goes well, we're gonna be seeing you guys tomorrow with Matt. Take care, have an awesome day.